America's strength and, yes, her military power have been a force for peace, not conquest.
By keeping our military strong, by using force where we must, America is making a difference for people here and around the world.
Our cause is just.
I was in the Pentagon when we got hit. You know, yes, it did change. It was a very dramatic and terrible thing, and it does change your perspective. But the war in Iraq had nothing to do with the war on terrorism. That was a huge leap, a manufactured leap, in order to implement a very calculated and pre-developed foreign policy.
We must take the battle to the enemy, disrupt his plans, and confront the worst threats before they emerge.
We're going to attack somebody. We're going to bomb someplace. There's no question about that. The question is, where are we going to do it and why?
Do you think that after an adversary gets nuclear weapons is a better time to engage that adversary than now without?
Iraq continues to flaunt its hostility toward America and to support terror. This is a regime that has something to hide from the civilized world.
The invasion of Iraq in 2003 is to a very considerable extent about repositioning the United States as the country that must be obeyed. It's an easy way to send a signal to the planet that the United States is in charge and it's going to do what it wants, and anybody who defies the United States will be punished.
The decision to attack Iraqi leadership at the opening salvo, it was a bold move. It was a new way of making war, and technology was able to provide our leadership that opportunity.
We had received this new weapon called the Enhanced Guided Bomb Unit 27, and it was like the new candy at the candy store. We needed something that was going to give us the capability to strike through the weather and not worry about having to bring the bombs home.
The whole of the city is still lit very brightly, but nobody's moving on the streets whatsoever. It's like everybody here is holding their breath.
We really didn't know who was there and who was going to take the blow of what we were about to do.
Both Colonel Truman and I probably had our suspicions about who it was.
We've gotten some indications that it may be Sons, it may be Saddam himself.
Assassination, people sometimes think with precision weapons that maybe you can now assassinate people from very high altitudes. I mean, golly. First of all, if it's a fixed target like a building, you have the time to understand its location. The next hardest target is one that moves around, and the single hardest target of all is a human being.
Sometimes before you can bring about democratic change, you have to remove the obstacle to democratic change. You have to remove Saddam Hussein because there's no hope for democracy with Saddam there.
The point, in many ways, for these guys wasn't just to topple Saddam.
The corporate interests that stand to benefit are so intertwined and interwoven with the political forces that the financial elites and the political elites have become the same people.
You do have to follow the money. If you follow the money here, it's not so much that Halliburton wanted a war, so they told Dick Cheney to go get one for him. It wasn't that. But you do get a willingness to go to war. American people who have a son or a daughter that's going to be deployed and maybe shot at, maybe killed or maimed in Iraq, they look at the cost-benefit and they go, I don't think that's good. But when politicians who understand contracts, future contracts, when they look at war, they have a different cost-benefit analysis.
The defense budget is $750 billion. Profits went up last year well over 25%. I guarantee you, when war becomes that profitable, you're going to see more of it.
You know, the whole idea of you can be all you can be if you join the army. We appeal to people's self-interest and then put them into a situation which is based on self-sacrifice.
It is why cynics in Washington say, we know Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, we have the receipts. This is what we mean by blowback. He remained a friend of ours right up to his invasion in the summer of 1990 of Kuwait. We became alarmed when he invaded Kuwait that he could also go on and invade Saudi Arabia itself. The largest reserves of oil on earth. We stationed troops in Saudi Arabia. It was a mistake in every sense of the term. Remember, Osama bin Laden had said, I resent the government of Saudi Arabia for using Americans to defend Saudi Arabia against Iraq. We began to fear that we were going to lose our position in Saudi Arabia. Well, the second largest source of proven reserves on earth are in Iraq. This leads us now to demonize our previous ally and to prepare the American public for the thought that we must take him out.
I'm retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, retired from the military after 20 years. I initially started in the Air Force, and they trained me as a communication electronics officer, and I did that for about 15 years. And once I joined the Pentagon, I became a political military affairs officer for Sub-Saharan Africa and Middle East. Things were strange from the very beginning of my assignment. Within a week or so, it became clear to me that war was going to happen. This toppling was going to happen. It was just a matter of bringing the American people up to speed and getting them behind this effort. A number of people from outside of the Pentagon, political appointees, were flowing into our office, and they were working Iraq issues. These political appointees that we had came from a very small set of think tanks.
As Eisenhower said, the military-industrial complex is really three components. There's the military professionals, there is defense industry, and there is Congress. There is now a fourth component, and that is the think tanks.
You know, one of the little-known secrets of Washington is that policy isn't really generated very much within the policy apparatus. A great number of the ideas come from outside the government, from various think tanks, like the Project for the New American Century.
Saddam Hussein, here's the man, here he is in his box. I wouldn't exaggerate the influence of the Project for the New American Century. It's a very small think tank, but in some respects we argued for, I suppose you might say, elements of the Bush Doctrine before the Bush Doctrine existed or before George W. Bush became president.
The group included principals like Rumsfeld, but it also included a large number of people more or less unknown to the American public.
And these people all know each other. They had all worked together before the Bush administration.
I used to write speeches for Don Rumsfeld in the Pentagon, and we came up with this phrase that weakness is provocative, strength deters.
Our report on rebuilding America's defenses said even before September 11th, the defense budget was too low. It looked ahead to the kinds of wars that we've now ended up fighting in Afghanistan and in Iraq.
What think tanks do is come up with new rationalizations and new threats. That's what they're paid to do.
Iraq under Saddam Hussein was a terrorist state. I think Iran is a terrorist state.
North Korea is a very special problem. They can build nuclear weapons, and they are perfectly capable of exporting them, and we cannot allow that.
These are states that not only host, but in a way fund international terrorism, encourage international terrorism. They have to be eliminated.
This was almost completely adopted by the administration, in part because the people who wrote this had all been brought into the administration.
We must prevent the terrorists and regimes who seek chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons from threatening the United States.
Needless to say, the president is correct.
What's going on, I'm sorry to say, is a belief that the public doesn't need to know.
The policy is?
I'm working my way over to figuring out how I won't answer that.
After the Vietnam War, the Pentagon began studying how can we make sure there are no more body bags in American living rooms. And we must find a way to no longer allow reporters in the field to actually see death.
In February of 2003, 10 million people around the world marched to demonstrate against the war in Iraq, the largest demonstrations in British history, 2 million in London, 400,000 in New York City, 1 million each in Berlin, Madrid, Rome.
On this February day, as this nation stands at the brink of battle, every American on some level must be contemplating the horrors of war. And yet, this chamber is, for the most part, ominously, dreadfully silent. Ah, you can hear a pin drop. Listen. There is no debate. There's no attempt to lay out for the nation the pros and cons of this particular war.
We have a Congress that failed in every way to ask the right questions, to hold the president to account. Our Congress failed us miserably, and that's because many in Congress are beholden to the military-industrial complex.